Hello, my name is Wade Anderson, and I thought I'd create a video to demonstrate a technique that I use. It's often easier just to demonstrate in a video than trying to explain in text methods or pictures and text, which is effective, but this is just easier. So what we have here is going to show you a technique that I use quite often, specifically in the scenario where you have a single part that's used in multiple assemblies in multiple DriveWorks projects, and they need the same consistent rules. So let's do that example here. It's specifically valuable when you're changing numeric value in one of the rules for one of the projects, and you have to go update all the rest of the projects. And I was thinking, well, what can we do? And so you'll see that I'll be using a group table to generate what I call global rules for consistent parts that are across multiple projects. So I'm going to use this part that you see in front of you, which is a sheet metal part. The part has a length up here. You can see I've captured the length, and then it has a slot down here that has an offset value and a length and some other things that you might want to drive within DriveWorks. So I've captured a few of those. So we're going to jump back over to DriveWorks here, and you can see that I've started writing some rules based on the length of that sheet metal part. This is the part that I just showed you. And then each project has its own form values, so I'm going to change the length on this project, and maybe another project's going to have its own form with its own length. But we need to specifically write rules that read that. And I like to write calculation rules for dimensions within variables. So I've done that, and I've assigned each one of these the length to what I call order length, slot offset, and so on. And you can see them right here. So for the order length, I'm just simply reading the length control form from the form. And then the slot offset, I'm using the order length, and I'm dividing it by 4 plus 2, some random number. And then the slot width, I made some random number as well. And now I need to get these rules and these variables into all my subsequent projects. So to do that, I'll copy the variables and I'll copy the rules. When I'm copying rules and I'm copying variables, I actually like to copy the rules first, and I'll do that by right-clicking on the frame member and hitting Copy Rules. I'll go over to my secondary project, and you can see that my secondary project has its own control form, and I've added this simple project to that member as well. So we'll go ahead and paste this on there, and you'll see that the variables or the rules get carried over. The reason I like to do the rules first is because of the feedback that DriveWorks gives you. This basically says, hey, those variables don't exist. So that's a good way to check to see if you're missing variables. So I'll do that quite often at this point. It's pretty simple. I know I need to grab these variables and place them back into that project. So we'll just paste those here. All right, so now we have two competing projects that have two competing forms, and let's start talking about how we deal with this. So right now it's all great until something needs to change. Let's say the slot width needs to go from 1.25 to some other number. So I'll go ahead and change that to 1.75. But if that number needs to be in all the other projects, then you have to go to each individual project and you have to punch in the rules for that as well. And so you change it, and you go back, and let's say you forget one, and then all of a sudden your builds aren't correct. And this happens a lot to me where the slot offset maybe needs to change slightly. So this 2, maybe it's too much and it needs to be 0.8175. So I often find myself taking the rule, going back here and updating it in all the other projects. And it's okay, it just becomes kind of cumbersome to do that. So I got to thinking, well, is there a way to create a global rule for this project in all the projects? And indeed there is, and that's with group tables, and that's what I'll show you next. Welcome back to global rules, as I call them. As you can see here, we have two independent projects, project 1, project 2. As discussed before, they contain the same part, the same rules in the same variables. However, over the course of testing and proving out one of your projects, you needed to make some modifications to the rules. So you can see the slot width is slightly different from one project to the other. The slot offset is slightly different from one project to the other, all through validating the project through the testing and building the specifications. You had to change them. But we also know they should be the same throughout each individual project that where this part is contained. And oftentimes I get caught with this where I'll be testing and I'll get knee deep into it. I'll change the numerical values and get it working in project 1, but I won't remember to update it in all the other projects where it's used. And for 2 projects, it's simple just to cut and paste. But if you have the same part, same rule in 4 or 5 different projects, you will forget to update it in all those other projects. So I'm going to come up with a method where I can use quote-unquote global rules to push into these projects. And I'm going to do that through the use of a group table. And to use a group table, I'm going to copy the rules from this project, and I'll open up a group table, which I have here in another session, and I'm going to cut and paste those rules from that project. And I could cut and paste them from any of the projects. I'm just simply trying to get the name of the components in there and use those as a variable that I can key on. I actually don't need the component path, so you can clean this up a little bit, delete it. If you need to use that, you can use it to filter and put this data into another control if you so desire. But essentially, this is where we're going to build the global rule in the rule specification here. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at our slot offset, and we're going to take the rules from either one of our projects variables. Slot offset. So we'll go ahead and take our slot offset. We'll go back to our table and we'll just paste that slot offset here. We'll make this a little bigger. So it's +2. We'll do the same thing for the slot width. And we'll just take that rule, copy it, Control C, there we go, and then put it back into the table where it belongs under slot width. So now we have our table that contains the rule that should be used throughout each of the projects for that particular variable. So we'll go ahead now and we'll go back to our projects. Now we need to take this project and tell it to basically read in that rule from the group table. And to do that, we're going to build up our values here. We're going to wipe out the old rule, and I'm going to use a lookup table function to look up a name, and that name needs to be slot width because that's what we called it in our group table. And I could simply use the lookup, key in slot width, or if I'm in a variable, I have this super secret DriveWorks function, if I could get it here, called MyName, and essentially that returns the name of the variable from which you're typing the rule in this case slot width. But I also see that it returns the full DriveWorks name, DWVariable, and I don't need that. So I'm going to use a substitute command. You could also use a replace. It's really up to you. I know that every time I use MyName, it's going to return DWVariable. So I'm just going to take that and wipe that out, replace that with nothing, and now I have the slot width name. So now at this point, I can build up my lookup table. We'll go ahead and look up. The value is what I just typed in there, which is slot width. And then we have to tell it the table. So the table can be typed in, or we can pull it from the menus there if you'd like. And then we tell it, I'm going to look up slot width from column 1 and return me whatever is in column 2. And we know based on building that table, column 2 is the actual text for the rule. Now under the value, it looks like you have a rule, but when you do a lookup, it just returns string values. So to turn the string value into a rule, I'm going to use another secret tool inside DriveWorks. It's not really secret, but it's called Indirect. And we'll say Indirect that whole mess and treat that as a local rule and solve it. So it does. So you see that it solves out 3.5 for this particular rule. Now the reason that we set up using MyName is that we can take that rule and we can just copy and build it for each variable that it needs to use, as long as the variable is named appropriately. So there's no unique variable rules written for each project. They all use the same thing. So we can take this rule, go ahead and copy it, and we can paste it back into the other rules in the other projects where I need them to be. So go ahead and build that, paste them in there. Now all my projects have the same rule, and you can see that they actually evaluate differently based on what the form control value is. So this is a way to write global rules. So when you're testing it, we can go back to our table. We can go into our rules section here, and we can start massaging these numbers. Maybe it needs to be 2.1758, and when you do that, then the values within that group table will also update according to that rule. So no more cut and pasting between projects to make sure that your rules are consistent. This is a great function. So there's two things that you're going to need. You're going to need a group table. You're going to need that table filled out with something to key on. You're also going to need to write the variable, the VLOOKUP table, to read that key and then return you with the rule text. And most importantly, it won't evaluate a rule until you wrap it with an indirect command. And when you do that, you got global rules. So that's the secret sauce. Thanks for listening. Put some comments below. I'm interested to see how other people are using group tables or any other method that I have here. Always looking to learn from other people. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.